I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. Our presenter for today is Mr. Chris Facero, the Army Corps of Engineers, and he has been our main project manager for the majority of the Section 205 study on the Tongue River. I'll let you go.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Can you see the presentation screen okay?
Now we see you.
You can just see me, but you can't see the presentation. Okay, let me try to get it shared again. You see it? You see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so like Sam said, my name is Chris Facero. I'm the Corps of Engineers project manager for the Miles City Section 205 study. And what I'll be presenting today is probably going to be familiar to a lot of the folks in the room. I recognize some faces there from what I could see on the camera. So I'll do just a brief review of the study and then try to update to where we are right now. Miles City requested this study from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's under the Section 205 program intended to address flood risk. And so there's a cost sharing for the study design and the construction. And those are shared. The feasibility study, which is the phase we're in now, is a 50-50 federal sponsor share. Design and construction would be 65% federal, 35% sponsor. And then long-term operations and maintenance is 100% sponsor share. And then the maximum total federal share, including everything, feasibility study, design and construction, is $10 million. And then, of course, the city of Miles City is our non-federal sponsor. So the study area is the Tongue River on both banks, from upstream of Interstate 94 to the confluence. So from about this area here all the way down. Excuse me, I was wanting to point here from this area here all the way down to the confluence with the Yellowstone River. And then the Yellowstone River right bank from upstream of the water treatment plant to downstream of the wastewater treatment plant. So it's the whole area shown shaded here. And as we said before, the study area could be expanded if additional issues or areas of interest are identified. And as those of you who've heard these presentations before know, we've decided to focus primarily on flooding from the Tongue River because we made an early determination that the cost of flood protection for Yellowstone flooding would be greater than what's allowed under Section 205. So the process that we're working through on the study, identify the problem, which of course we've done, identify and evaluate different alternatives for managing the flood risk. And so we've looked at structural and non-structural. We have to determine what's called the National Economic Development Plan. And then we can look at other plans like a locally preferred plan. And then finally, we need to complete the feasibility study report and seek approval to implement a project. And the study schedule that we've been on, we're still in this same part of the schedule, evaluating, comparing plans, trying to select a recommended plan and developing a draft report. So this is stretched on longer than we anticipated. And I'll talk a little bit more about the current status and why that's stretched out like that. And I already talked about these general study steps. Just a quick review of what we've done so far is we looked at an evaluation of existing conditions and determined that based on the damages that we had calculated, we have a maximum affordable project in the range of about $15 to $33 million. We did develop an initial array of alternative plans back in 2018. And we screen those and narrow those down, and I'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute. And then we looked at different options for different parts of that alignment, where we might use a levee or a flood wall, for example, depending on the space that was available. And then we completed our preliminary economic analysis of the levee alignments. And so just as a quick recap, the damage reaches that we're looking at, this again is that whole study area, and we have reach 1, reach 2, reach 3, all on the right bank of the Tug River, and then reach 4 on the left bank. So we had screened those levee alignments and really narrowed it down to what's shown here. So you can see it generally follows the existing levee alignment. However, there are some areas where we're looking at, say, a flood wall versus a levee, because a levee has a much larger footprint, and flood wall can fit in a narrower area. And so we've looked at this alignment, and we came up with preliminary results. And we talked with the city last October about these preliminary results. So we had a range from what we called the low riprap up to the high riprap. And so riprap is the large rock that's used to armor the bank to prevent erosion. And so the alignment that I showed there, with most of it being close to the riverbank, requires a lot of riprap protection, especially in areas where there's been erosion in the past. And so we had a low riprap estimate, where when we looked at our net annual benefits, we got positive net benefits. And of course, that would yield a benefit cost ratio above 1, which is what we're looking for our National Economic Development Plan, or that NED plan. But on the other end, we had the high riprap, which was negative net annual benefits. And so a benefit cost ratio less than 1. So it wouldn't be justified under our criteria for Section 205. And we talked with the city last October about the fact that our actual requirement is probably somewhere between that low and that high estimate. So there might be an economically feasible levee project. And the maximum project cost for Section 205 is about $15 million. And that's based on that maximum federal investment being $10 million. So, when we looked at these low and high riprap estimates, we had the benefit cost ratio at the low end that would be above 1, but our total cost for the project would be well over the Section 205 study limit. And so we talked with Sam and other folks about what our possible options were. And so, we thought we could continue under Section 205 if there was a change to the Section 205 project cost limit, which back in October was a possibility under the infrastructure legislation, which there has since been an infrastructure bill that passed, but it didn't change that Section 205 project cost limit. And there is some language in there that might allow it to be adjusted some for projects that are very close to the limit, but from what we know, it wouldn't apply to this project, which is well above the limit. And so we also talked about we could continue the study under what's called the General Investigations Program if the Corps and Miles City would consider that there's a good implementation potential. So this is something that we talked about back when we started the Section 205 study, whether we wanted to look at general investigations. And the differences are that under General Investigations Program, we have to get specific authorization to conduct the study and get funding for that. And then in order to implement a project, we would have to get congressional authorization. Whereas under Section 205, we don't need those high-level authorizations. We can just study, and if there's a viable project that's feasible under the criteria for Section 205, we can implement it without that congressional authorization. And so at that October meeting, the Corps said we would work on refining our riprap estimate to update our costs and our economic analysis. and we would look at a preliminary life safety analysis. And so we tried to refine that riprap estimate as best we could. And kind of the problem that we run into is that it's an inexact science, how you decide how much riprap to use. And we talked with some of our, we have what are called centers of expertise that could help us look at how we would design the riprap. And we talked in particular with what's called our Cold Regions Engineering Lab, because one of the big reasons for the riprap is the ice on the Tongue and Yellowstone rivers, and in particular on the Yellowstone. And they gave us some options for doing some additional study to try to find out if we would need closer to the low riprap estimate or closer to the high estimate. But they were all pretty expensive options and things that we can't really do under Section 205. And so we've looked instead to see if there's an option where we could set the levee back farther from the riverbank. And if we were to set it back and not need to use that riprap because of the setback, would there be an option that would be economically justified there? And so we're in the process right now of looking at that, and we have a preliminary levee alignment, and we've developed a preliminary cost estimate and are working on the economic analysis of it. And it looks like there's a possibility that there could be a setback levee that might be economically justified, but it would probably still be more than the Section 205 project cost limit. And we've talked with Sam and others at the city about the possibility of doing something like, we've talked a little bit earlier about the different damage reaches here. And so that graphic that I showed earlier, this slide here, protects reach 1, reach 2, and reach 3. Now our setback levee that we developed protects just reach 1 and reach 2, but doesn't protect reach 3 because it would end right about in this area. We've talked about possibly being able to coordinate a project with the city using some of the infrastructure funding, or there's the COVID relief funding that I know the city has been pursuing, so that we could do a Corps of Engineers project that would protect reaches 1 and 2, and then coordinate that with a Miles City project that would protect reach 3, and that way get the cost of a Corps of Engineers cost shared project down below the Section 205 limit, and be able to do that part and then coordinate it with reach 3. But right now there's still uncertainty about whether we can do that and how well we can coordinate that. There's some uncertainty on the Corps of Engineers side on being able to find a justified project, and whether or not we want to go into the general investigation program or try to stick in Section 205 to protect these two reaches. And then there's some uncertainty for Miles City on whether that grant funding would be available from one of the possible sources that's being pursued. And so, I guess the bottom line on the update now is we are still working through those issues with the city and seeing if we can find a way, ideally, to keep the study under Section 205, to not have to go through the additional review and authorization processes that are required for the General Investigations Program. But if we can't do that, decide if we would like to undertake a general investigation study, and then the second part of the decision making that's going on is there a way to coordinate Corps of Engineers cost shared study and project with the Miles City project. So once we get that decision made, working with the city, the things that remain to be done are, we would have to decide what project we want to recommend, and then we would have to refine the design for that, develop a cost estimate for the refined design, and update our economic analysis. We'd have to analyze our environmental and cultural resource impacts, which we don't really anticipate a lot of those, other than we would have to do mitigation for trees that would be removed in reconstructing a levee on the existing alignment. We have to do our feasibility report and our environmental documentation, do our reviews for the feasibility report and the environmental document, and that would include our public review. And then we would do our final feasibility report, final feasibility report, and submit that for review and approval. So that's where the Section 205 study stands now, kind of at a crossroads where we're deciding how to proceed with it. And that's really all that I had in terms of presentation, but wanted to leave time for any questions or answers that anyone had, or if there's any discussion, Sam, that you want to add surrounding the possible, city project and coordinating that with the Section 205. There may be a separate presentation on that. So that might be something that would wait for that presentation too.
And yes, there is another presentation actually after yours, where we will give an update on the Yellowstone portion of it and the grant funding that we're going to be applying for that project. So I guess it would be if anyone has any questions currently on the Tongue River portion of the project. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Kathy Wilcox. I'm a Ward 3 council member, and I was interested in your slide where you were showing the cost of the low and high riprap stuff.
Okay,
And
let me.
Sure. Okay, so the column I'm wondering about, total annual costs. Is that for upkeep, maintenance? What are the annual costs?
So the annual costs are, we take this column, which is the total costs, and so that's total costs of construction, and then we annualize that over a period of 50 years. So our planning horizon is set at 50 years, which is it's the expected lifetime of the project, although levees obviously last a lot longer than that, but that's 50 years is what we always use for economic analysis. And so that's this cost annualized over 50 years. And then we add into that any ongoing annual operation and maintenance costs. And that annualized cost plus the annual operation and maintenance costs are what make up this total annual cost. So in reality, the total annual cost to the city to operate and maintain, say, a levee would not be this high, because this annual cost includes the annualized upfront cost or the annualized construction cost. Does that make sense, and does that answer your question?
It does. Can you give me an idea of what you think the annual operation and maintenance costs would be? What number you use to calculate that?
I can give you that. I'm sorry, I don't know it right off the top of my head, and I can't pull up the document that has it right now because I have to disconnect from our work network in order to use Zoom. But what I can do is I can share that number with Sam, if that's okay, Sam, to share with the community, because we do have that. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can.
That would be great, because we're coming into our budgeting season, and it would be helpful to know what that might be in terms of going forward.
I can definitely do that. I apologize, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Oh, no problems. I think you're doing great. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.
I have a question. My name is Ken Gardner. I'm the councilman for Ward 1, one of them. I thought the last time all this was discussed, I might have got a little confused, but I thought the footprint we were gonna use is basically the old dike all the way to the Yellowstone River Bridge. Is that right?
Yes, sir. So that's correct. So on those slides that we were looking at before, that's essentially it's a multicolored line because there are different segments in there, but that's this line right here, which is pretty close to the existing alignment from I-94 all the way down to the Yellowstone River Bridge. And so that is the alignment that those numbers we just looked at a moment ago is based on.
Right.
And if we decided to pursue a general investigation study, which would allow for the higher project cost limit, and well, actually in general investigation studies, there really is no project cost limit. It's whatever Congress authorizes. So if we did that study, then we would continue with this alignment. Now, if we wanted to stick under section 205, we could either look at a reduced length, like part of the alignment, say reach 1 and or reach 2, or if we were looking at that setback levee, we might be looking at reach 1 and 2. So it'd be different alignments, and that would be where we would hopefully be able to combine with that Yellowstone River project to provide comprehensive protection for Miles City, but not all of it under section 205, since the study limit is lower.
Can you give me an idea what kind of freeboard there'd be on, like right around the Yellowstone River, River Bridge? Have you got any specs on that at all?
You mean how much levee freeboard we would design for?
Yeah.
So we typically design for a levee to have a levee freeboard of a few feet. So we look at a design event like the 1% annual chance, which is the 100-year flood, for example, and we design, then our criteria call for there to be some freeboard. I don't know exactly what it is at the Yellowstone River Bridge. I could check to see if we are that far along in the design and send that number to Sam as well. But there would be in any levee design, there would be freeboard designed into it for for uncertainty, to make sure that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I believe the Code of Federal Regulations requires it to be 3 feet. 3 feet of freeboard.
How much?
3 feet above the 100-year flood.
Okay.
That's typical. Yeah, Sam, I agree.
So this part 1 and 2 is just the Tongue River. 3 is over on the Yellowstone.
3 is from Milwaukee Bridge to the Yellowstone Bridge. 1 is from the interstate to Pacific, and then Pacific to Milwaukee is reach 2. So reach 3 is the one that, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's what's costing the most money for the entire project. That's where we're trying to work. The next presentation, I'll do a little bit. That's where we're trying to work on figuring out and get grant money to do a study on that to hopefully reduce the cost some for the, either way it's going to cost a lot of money, because that riprap has got to be there to protect it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm Butch Grenz. I'm Ward 2 councilperson. I have the other night at a meeting, I asked, well, it came up that the water plant is not in the floodway. How did that get out, or is it just the elevation, or that'd be across the river from the Tongue River?
I don't know the answer to that question, sir. Sam, is that one you know the answer to, or?
I wasn't here when FEMA did the maps, so that would be a question for FEMA. on why either one of the plants are not in the floodway?
I can ask Sam if someone here happens to know that, but I don't know the answer to that right off.
I didn't take over when the maps took effect, so I don't know why they're not.
I have a follow-up question also. Does every city that's on the Yellowstone River have the same regulations from FEMA or whoever on these dikes and whatever, or do they negotiate per city for where they're at or whatever? I would think they're all flood problems.
I believe all the cities are under the same regulations. Certainly with FEMA they are, and then local floodplain administrators might have different rules. That's Sam, you might be better able to answer that than me since you're the floodplain administrator there in Miles City. But
All the same, or are you talking just
Well,
regulations in general?
I don't know. What I'm asking is, are we held to the same criteria as, say, big timber?
Yes. So the way it works for levies and regulations is we all have to at a minimum follow the Code of Federal Regulations. And then on top of that, the state of Montana. So everyone has to follow the same Code of Federal Regulations. Each state can have different standards. Montana happens to have the additional 2-foot of freeboard to build a house. And then locally, you can have even more stringent standards, which we don't. Ours just follow the state and federal ones. So that would be the same. And then for a levy, we just follow the Code of Federal Regulations.
And I have one more worry about something. I've lived here 75 years, and I can remember, 25, 30 years ago, we used to have, if the Tongue River went out before the Yellowstone, it was really a mess. But it used to push ice up on the dike that was 2-3 feet deep, thick, But ever since they put in that Yellowtail Dam, when you go to Billings, just like this year with a pretty cold year, there's never no ice in the Bighorn River at all going down, and that's when you cross it going to Billings or back from Billings. It's a few hundred yards to the Yellowstone, and I believe at that time of the year, the Bighorn River probably has 2 or 3 times as much water in it as the Yellowstone does, and I would think that a thermal study on how that affects people down. I know we haven't had any problems since that went in to speak of, and when the ice does go out, it's only about 6 to 8 inches deep. Whereas Glendive, on the other hand, farther down the deal, they have a problem almost every year with that. And I don't think anybody else has had a problem from where the confluence of the Bighorn and the Yellowstone come together all the way down to us. I've never had a problem that I've heard about in the last 20 years either. I don't know if they ever look into that kind of stuff. That's my question.
Sir, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can talk with our hydraulic engineers here and see if they have any insights on that and share that back with Sam. But I apologize, that's not one that I'm able to answer. I can follow up on it though.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Good, just free for all.
Chris, it's Kathy Wilcox again. I just have one more request. And I am wondering if you would be willing to share your PowerPoint with Sam so that she can share it with City Council. It
It's
just has,
recorded.
but I mean, like a PDF.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So it just would be a great resource for the council to be able to print out and use for reference.
A little
Yeah, I
bit-
sure
Sorry,
can do
go ahead.
that. Oh, no problem, Sam.
Our last meeting in October, when he went over all of this too, I did a very long minutes on that. And I brought up some of his pictures. I brought up the cost stuff and that
Yeah.
too. It was one of the flood control meeting that met on that, but if you guys want, I can make a copy of all of them, put on your boxes.
I don't need that one so much as, and I don't even really need minutes from this. It's just the slide that will
Okay.
jog my memory.
And my minutes do have some slides in it. I
Yeah.
saw some pictures from him and put them in there, so.
Yeah, yeah.
People could understand.
I save all those, but
Okay.
this would be good. Thank you.
Sure.
this is
no
Ken.
problem.
You done?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
This is Ken Gardner again. I don't know, I thought that at this time, we would actually know the alignment of Reach 3. The chosen one. Is that,
Yes.
does Sam have that?
Because it hasn't been chosen.
What's that?
It hasn't been chosen yet because of all of these little things that have come up with the setback levy and the cost being so high now compared to what it was when we applied for this, what, 5 years ago? All of those, the Corps is still reviewing that stuff to try and get us the best BCA we can so that we can continue with the 205, as opposed to having to go before Congress and waiting for them to meet to be able to hear on it. So the alignment for 3 has not been finalized yet because council's going to finalize that.
When will we be doing that?
After they get but is it the information that you need, the setback information and cost of life information?
Yeah, so once we have that last alternative that we're looking at, the setback levy, to see if there's one that can fit under the Section 205 program, then that would be the decision point where, like Sam was saying, that Miles City would have to decide if they want to pursue the larger project, including that levy alignment that I showed that goes all the way along Reach 1, 2, and 3. But we'd have to pursue that under that general investigations program versus trying to pursue a smaller project with the Corps that could still fit under Section 205, but might not include everything. And then trying to make that work with a local project funded from some of that grant money. So we expected too that by now we would have a levy alignment set and be further along, but because of that, having to try to find a way to fit it under Section 205 or considering whether to move it to the general investigation program, that's why we're not there yet.
You guys have anything else? Anybody online have anything? Okay, Chris, I want to thank you for your time today and taking the time to present to us. I'm sure that I'll be contacting you again because we always have our October meeting too, unless you have some fantastic information ahead of time that we're able to stay in the Section 205.
Well, yeah, well, thank you, Sam. And I will follow up on these questions I took notes on that I wasn't able to answer and get back with you. And then hopefully within the next, couple weeks to a month, we'll have information on that setback levy and be able to get all that to you. And you can continue to work with the council on that decision. So I appreciate everyone's questions and attention, and thanks again.
Very helpful, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
You're welcome.